In my defense, I had spent the previous 2 hours replacing a burned-out service panel in a dentist's office outside Cincinnati. I arrived at the restaurant 23 minutes late, still wearing work jeans, heavy boots, and a faded shirt with my company name across the chest. Matt had arranged the blind date. According to him, I had spent 2 years after my divorce treating every invitation like an optional change order. When I entered, I spotted Jenna near the front windows. She had dark hair pulled back, a blue jacket over the chair beside her, and the expression of someone trying very hard not to lose patience. The man across from her was probably in his late 50s. Expensive suit, silver watch, calm voice. A thick estimate sat open between them. "You're looking at extensive structural reinforcement," he said. "Full electrical replacement. Emergency framing. Once the bank sees these numbers, continued financing becomes uncertain." Then he slid a folder toward her. "My offer lets you leave before this becomes worse." I should have waited by the host's stand. That would have been normal. Instead, I heard him mention $86,000 for temporary support work, and my feet changed direction on their own. I stopped beside the table. "That estimate makes no sense." Both of them looked up. The man leaned back. "This is a private meeting." "I'm Connor," I said, looking at Jenna. "Your blind date. Apparently, also your late blind date." Her eyes moved from my shirt to my boots, then back to my face. "You're Matt's friend?" Unfortunately, that got the smallest smile from her. The man closed the estimate halfway. "We're discussing a commercial property matter." "I can leave," I told Jenna. "Just say the word." She looked at the folder in front of her. "Stay." The man's jaw tightened. "Lawrence." "Connor." He didn't offer his hand. I pointed toward the estimate without touching it. "I only heard part of the conversation, but you've got electrical corrections priced like a complete building replacement. Temporary supports priced like finished permanent work. Demolition appears in 2 different sections, and neither section explains what is actually being removed." Lawrence gave me the kind of smile people use when they want to remind you that your shirt came from a workwear store. "And your qualifications?" "I run a renovation and electrical contracting company. A small residential company. Mostly older houses and smaller commercial buildings," I said. 2 employees, 1 truck, and no private airplane. Jenna covered another smile with her hand. Lawrence wasn't amused. "Then you are not qualified to discuss the structural condition of Riverside." "I'm not a structural engineer," I said. "I wouldn't certify the building. But a serious estimate should explain which exact conditions require an engineer. This one uses broad language and very large numbers." He turned to Jenna. "You know my offer will not remain available." She closed the folder and pushed it back. "That will make it easier to stop discussing it." Lawrence stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked at me once more. A second man near the bar rose at the same time and followed him toward the door. I noticed him because he had spent the whole conversation pretending to study his phone while watching our table. After they left, Jenna looked at me. "You always interrupt strangers over paperwork." "Only on first dates." We didn't order dinner. Jenna said she had lost her appetite, and I was pretty sure showing up late and arguing with a developer had already moved us beyond the usual appetizer stage. We stepped outside under the restaurant awning. The evening was warm, and traffic moved along the riverfront streets behind us. Jenna told me about Riverside Works, a 3-story brick building that had once been a print shop and warehouse. She wanted studios, small offices, a shared workshop, meeting rooms, and eventually a cafe near the tall front windows. "Lawrence owns the parcels on both sides," she said. "Riverside sits between them and the main service route toward the river. He can't combine everything the way he wants unless I sell." That explained the repeated offers. Then she told me about deliveries moving without warning, hardware arriving wrong, permit questions returning after they had already been addressed, and subcontractors suddenly becoming unavailable. Her general contractor had walked away 3 weeks earlier. "Maybe some of it is normal," she said. "That's the problem. I don't know which part." "What do you want from me?" "Walk through Riverside tomorrow. 1 preliminary visit," I said. "You should not make a decision based on a man you met beside a breadbasket." "I don't want comfort, Connor. I want a list of what is real." The next morning, Riverside looked better than Lawrence's estimate and worse than Jenna's hopes. The brick exterior walls were thick. The original floor beams looked substantial. Sunlight came through enormous industrial windows and stretched across the open first floor. The layout had potential, and access from both the street and service alley was useful. The problems were real too. Water had entered around several windows. Parts of the wiring were outdated. 2 floor sections needed repair. Fire separation between areas was incomplete. The roof had been ignored too long, and temporary braces near the rear corridor had been installed poorly. Still, it was not a lost building. I can review the electrical work, document conditions, and handle temporary corrections within my license, I told Jenna. But Daniel needs to look at the primary structure. Who is Daniel? An engineer who tells me when I'm wrong before it becomes expensive. She called him that morning. Before lunch, she also put a written agreement in front of me. Paid technical audit, electrical review, temporary stabilization, delivery record review, coordination with Daniel, controlled access for anyone entering the site. You came prepared, I said. I'm done relying on vague promises. 2 days later, Daniel walked the building and confirmed what I suspected. Riverside needed work, but the main structure was reparable. Some temporary supports had to be corrected, yet the huge reinforcement plan Lawrence had presented went far beyond the current conditions. Jenna started a digital site log while I checked the rear bracing against the approved notes. That was where the first odd detail appeared. The fasteners in the temporary supports were too light for the specified work. Near the service entrance, I found the security cable. It had not pulled loose or worn through. The end was straight and clean. It had been cut. Jenna photographed it, then opened the delivery records on her laptop. One invoice listed heavy-duty hardware for the exact braces we were examining. We searched the storage room, the loading area, and every unopened container on site. The approved hardware was nowhere in the building. Jenna stared at the invoice, then at the empty shelf where the hardware should have been. It says delivered Tuesday at 9:14. Who signed for it? She scrolled down. Initials only. RM. Anyone here with those initials? No. I checked the packing slip again. The order number matched. The quantity matched. The description matched the approved notes Daniel had reviewed. The actual fasteners in the braces were lighter, cheaper, and not suitable for the load they were supposed to hold. That didn't automatically mean someone had planned anything. Construction sites are full of wrong boxes, rushed installers, and paperwork filled out by people who stopped caring before lunch. But the cut security cable made the mistake harder to ignore. Jenna added both items to her log. Date, location, condition, photograph. Who found it? Corrective action. Related invoice. She didn't make accusations. She just typed carefully and asked me to check the wording before she saved it. Say not located on site, I told her. Not stolen. We don't know what happened. She nodded. Facts first. That's usually cheaper than being dramatic. By late afternoon, Morris arrived. He was Jenna's attorney, a thin man with reading glasses and a habit of pausing before every answer. He walked through the rear corridor, looked at the cable, then reviewed the photographs. We need 3 separate categories, he said. Real building conditions, poor work, possible outside interference. Jenna folded her arms. And we don't mix them. Exactly. Suspicion is not documentation. That evening, Daniel emailed his written report. The main structure was sound enough to continue renovation. The temporary supports required correction, but Riverside was not facing the kind of immediate failure Lawrence had described. It was the first document Jenna had received in weeks that gave her a clear answer instead of another warning. The next morning, I replaced the incorrect electrical connections near the rear service area and started correcting the temporary braces under Daniel's instructions. Jenna stood beside a folding table with coffee, her laptop, and 3 labeled folders. She handed me a cup. No sugar, she said. Small amount of cream. You remembered. You said it twice yesterday. I was tired. You were very specific for a tired person. I took the cup and looked at the second one. Almond milk. She looked surprised. You remembered too. I notice useful details. That sounds less friendly than it probably is. Over the next several days, we settled into a routine. I arrived early with my crew. Jenna verified each delivery before anything came through the service entrance. She checked part numbers, quantities, supplier names, and the person receiving the order. Nothing moved without a photograph. We put tamper seals across the corrected brace connections. We changed the building entry codes. Morris recommended a new recorder that didn't depend on the old security wiring, so we installed one in a locked cabinet. I also mounted 2 battery-powered trail cameras in areas where the new system had blind spots. Jenna started a daily visitor log. At first, Some subcontractors complained. One plumber said signing in made the place feel like a government building. Jenna held out the clipboard. Then write clearly. He signed. She wasn't becoming controlling. She was becoming informed. There was a difference. She asked questions about everything, but not the kind designed to prove she already knew the answer. She wanted to understand why one floor crack was ordinary movement and another needed attention. She learned how to recognize old watermarks, active leaks, bad repairs, and language in estimates that sounded important without actually promising any specific work. One afternoon, she found my spare tape measure on the folding table and dropped it into her bag so it wouldn't disappear under a stack of plans. Write in the comments. What tool do you always seem to misplace? A tape measure, screwdriver, hammer, or something else? You know that belongs to me, I said. I'm protecting company property. You've had it for 3 days. Then my system is working. I should have been more careful about how much I liked being there. Not because of the building. Riverside was a good project, and the contract was clear. Jenna paid on schedule, approved changes in writing, and never expected extra work because we happened to be getting along. But I had avoided serious dating since my divorce, mostly by keeping my calendar full enough that nobody could accuse me of having free time. Now I was eating lunch with Jenna at a folding table while she argued with a supplier about missing anchor plates. She was good at it. Polite at first, specific after that, then completely unwilling to accept an answer that did not match the records. The supplier claimed the order had been changed before shipment. By whom? She asked. They couldn't say. She requested the change authorization in writing. The person on the phone transferred her twice, then promised to call back. They won't, I said. They will when Morris sends the same question. She was right. That evening, after my crew left, Jenna and I walked the first floor together. Sunlight came through the front windows and lit up the old brick. For a few minutes, Riverside looked less like a problem and more like the place she had described at the restaurant. Studios near the windows. Offices along the quieter side. A workshop toward the rear. You can actually see it now, I said. I always saw it. You just couldn't tell which people were lying about it. She stopped walking. That might be the nicest thing you've said to me. I brought you a sandwich yesterday. It had mustard. You said you liked mustard. I said I could tolerate it. Important distinction. She smiled, then glanced toward the rear corridor. The new recorder had sent an alert to her phone. Movement after midnight. We pulled up the footage in the locked office. A man entered through the service corridor at 12:38. The camera caught only part of his face, but I recognized him immediately. He was the man who had been near Lawrence at the restaurant. The one pretending to look at his phone. On the screen, he moved toward the temporary supports and stayed there for almost 4 minutes. The next morning, one tamper seal was broken. 2 fasteners had been loosened. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. The video was paused on the man's shoulder as he leaned toward the brace. His face wasn't clear enough for me to call it identification by itself, but I had seen him at the restaurant. Same build, same jacket, same way of standing slightly off to the side while pretending not to be involved. Jenna looked at the broken seal again. That wasn't loose yesterday. No, I said, and we have photographs showing exactly how it was left. She took out her phone, but I stopped her before she touched anything. Pictures first. Wide view, close view, seal number, both fasteners. She did that, then called Morris. By noon, he had arranged for the original video file to be copied and preserved by someone who handled digital records for legal cases. He told us not to email it around, edit it, or post a clip anywhere. Keep the original system untouched, he said, and do not contact the man yourselves. Jenna didn't argue. That told me how serious she understood the situation had become. She checked the visitor log. No one had permission to enter after hours. The service code used on the recording had belonged to the former general contractor's office, and it should have been disabled weeks earlier. We changed every code again. Then Jenna called the hardware supplier. This time she did not accept transfers or promises. She asked for the warehouse supervisor, gave the invoice number, and said she needed the original order, the approved revision, and the account information attached to the change. The supervisor tried to tell her it was probably a normal adjustment. Then the record should be easy to send, she said. He went quiet. By the next afternoon, she had an email from him. The heavy-duty hardware had been on the original order. After approval, someone requested a substitution for the lighter fasteners. The change came through a purchasing address connected to a consulting company that worked for Lawrence's development group. Jenna read the message twice. There it is. It proves someone connected to his company changed the order, I said. It doesn't prove Lawrence personally typed the email. I know. She sounded disappointed, but only for a second. Then she forwarded everything to Morris and added it to the site log. He prepared a formal notice telling Lawrence and anyone acting for him to stop contacting suppliers, entering Riverside, or interfering with the project. Lawrence's response came through his attorney. He denied any wrongdoing. The consultant, according to him, had only been trying to correct a purchasing mistake. Attached to the denial was another offer to buy Riverside. Jenna printed it, placed it in a folder, and wrote "No" across the first page. 3 days later, a city inspector arrived. He said the city had received an anonymous complaint claiming the building had unsafe supports, exposed electrical hazards, and workers entering restricted areas. A month earlier, that kind of visit probably would have knocked Jenna off balance. This time she opened a binder. She gave him Daniel's report, the permits, daily logs, repair photographs, access records, and a list of areas where work was still incomplete. I walked him through the electrical corrections. For structural questions, Daniel joined by phone. The inspector spent almost 2 hours inside. He found unfinished work. Of course he did. Riverside was a renovation site, not a finished hotel lobby. He also found one missing label, an access path that needed to be cleared, and a fire separation detail that required correction before the next phase. What he did not find was a reason to close the building. Jenna received the written correction list that afternoon and pinned it to the wall. "Ordinary problems," she said. "Best kind. I never thought I'd be happy about a correction notice. You're learning construction." The next break came from the former contractor. He called Jenna after hearing Riverside had remained open. At first, he spoke carefully, like a man trying to admit something without making himself look bad. A representative from Lawrence's company had offered him a large job shortly before he left Riverside. The same representative had suggested that staying with Jenna's project could create problems for future municipal work. "Did he tell you to damage anything?" Jenna asked. "No," the contractor said. "Nothing like that. I left because I didn't want trouble." He still had the message. Morris now had the altered order, the entry footage, the broken seals, and the contractor's saved message. None of it placed Lawrence inside Riverside. It did show a pattern moving through people tied to his business. Then the weather changed. A line of severe thunderstorms moved towards Cincinnati late one afternoon. I was at a hardware store loading conduit when Jenna called. The security system sent an alert from the second floor. "Are you inside?" "No. I'm in my car." "Stay there." I reached Riverside 10 minutes later. Wind pushed rain across the street, and water was already running along the curb. Jenna was waiting near the front entrance with the site binder under her jacket. We checked the exterior first. No broken windows. No obvious wall movement. I called Daniel before we entered. Inside, we found water coming through one of the unsealed upper windows. Near the support area, a temporary brace had shifted. It was the same brace that had been tampered with before. The seal was broken again. There were fresh tool marks near the connection. Daniel stayed on the phone while I installed supplemental shoring from the material we had stored on site. I followed his instructions exactly and sent him photographs before tightening the final connections. Jenna recorded every step. Time, weather, broken seal, tool marks, shifted brace, emergency correction. When we finished, the storm was still hitting the windows hard, but the support was stable. We sat in the front room under temporary work lights, both soaked from the walk-in. Jenna looked at me for a long moment, then moved closer. I thought she was going to kiss me. She stopped just before she did. "I don't know how much of this is fear," she said, "or gratitude, or exhaustion." "Then we don't guess." Her eyes stayed on mine. "You're okay waiting? I want your answer when nobody is pressuring you." She let out a slow breath and nodded. Later, the security footage showed the same representative entering Riverside earlier that evening, before the worst part of the storm arrived. The next morning, Morris arranged the meeting everyone had been avoiding. The bank wanted to know whether Riverside was still a reasonable project. The city wanted proof that work could continue safely. The insurer wanted better control over who entered the property. Lawrence arrived with an attorney and the same calm expression he had worn at the restaurant. Daniel joined us at the conference table. I sat beside a stack of photographs, repair notes, and electrical records. Jenna had the main project binder in front of her. Morris started with the purchase offers. Then he showed the timeline. Each time Jenna refused to sell, another problem followed. A supplier changed an approved order. A contractor left after receiving outside pressure. Anonymous complaints arrived. A man connected to Lawrence's company entered Riverside without permission. Morris played only the necessary sections of the footage. The representative walked into the support area. The tamper seal was intact before he arrived and broken afterward. Then Morris showed the supplier email connecting the hardware substitution to the consulting company used by Lawrence's development group. Lawrence leaned toward his attorney and whispered something. His attorney said, "There is no evidence my client personally directed any improper action." Morris didn't argue. "This meeting is not a trial," he said. "We are establishing whether Riverside remains viable and whether continued outside interference creates an unacceptable risk." Daniel spoke next. He explained that Riverside had real repair needs, but its permanent structure remained workable. He described the temporary supports, the corrected connections, and the supplemental shoring installed during the storm. He also made it clear that I had followed his instructions. I appreciated that part, mostly because I had no interest in pretending I had designed anything myself. When it was my turn, I explained the electrical conditions and the brace fasteners. I showed the duplicated demolition costs and Lawrence's estimate in the sections that used broad language without defining the actual work. I didn't call the estimate fake. I said it priced the worst possible interpretation of every condition while failing to explain what would actually be done. The city inspector confirmed that Riverside had unfinished work but no current basis for a stop work order. The correction list was ordinary for a project at that stage. The bank officer asked Jenna what had changed since the original contractor left. Jenna closed the binder. "I stopped treating every warning like it came from an expert," she said. "I hired an engineer. I hired Connor under a written contract. I brought Morris, Indiana. I verified deliveries, controlled access, and documented every correction." She looked directly at Lawrence. "Riverside has problems. I know what they are now. I also know which ones were exaggerated and which ones appeared after people connected to your company became involved." Lawrence's attorney started to respond, but Jenna kept going. "I am not asking permission to remain the owner. I am explaining why this project will continue." That was the moment the room changed. The bank agreed to maintain financing with updated reporting and scheduled reviews. The insurer kept coverage in place, provided Jenna continued the controlled access system. The city confirmed that work could move forward. Morris announced that he was filing for a temporary order barring Lawrence's representatives from entering Riverside. He was also seeking records tied to the supplier change and the unauthorized access. Lawrence gathered his papers slowly. As he passed Jenna, he said, "You're making this more expensive than it needs to be." She answered, "For you, maybe." A few weeks later, the temporary order was granted. The supplier released its complete records, and the consulting company began distancing itself from the representative in the videos. Nothing ended with a dramatic confession. Lawrence simply lost the advantage he had depended on. Jenna hired a new general contractor after checking every reference herself. Daniel continued overseeing the structural work. My company stayed on for electrical upgrades, temporary corrections, and coordination. The difference was that no single person controlled the whole project. Jenna built a team. The temporary braces were replaced with permanent work. We repaired the damaged floor sections, sealed the worst windows, upgraded the main service, and completed the fire separation on the first level. The first finished area was the shared studio near the front windows. On inspection day, the room had clean walls, restored brick, new lights, and sunlight stretched across the floor. It wasn't decorated yet, but it finally looked like a place where people could work. After the inspector approved the space, the crew left early. Jenna stayed behind. She placed 2 coffees on a work table. "No sugar," she said, handing me mine. "Almond milk. And yours?" "Absolutely not." For the first time since I had met her, nothing urgent was happening. She looked around the room. I used to think I wanted an easy life. And now, a solid one. I leaned against the table. Solid doesn't happen by accident. People show up. They correct mistakes. They stop hiding the problems. She watched me for a second. "I'm not only talking about Riverside." "I know." She stepped closer. "Do you still want to wait?" "I wanted to wait until your answer belonged to you." "It does." This time, when she kissed me, neither of us stopped. It was calm, certain. No storm outside. No alert on her phone. No one waiting to take something from her. Our first real date happened several days later. We kept the contracts clear. Morris insisted on that. Jenna agreed before he finished the sentence. Months later, Riverside opened the first floor for a small preview event. Artists, contractors, neighbors, and local business owners filled the studio. Jenna thanked the whole team. I stood with my crew, which was exactly where I belonged. After everyone left, the restored lights glowed against the brick. Jenna came over and slipped her hand into mine. My tape measure was still in her bag. Her almond milk was still in my cooler. "What do you see now?" she asked. I looked across the finished studio. A building that was never too broken. It was just surrounded by people who benefited from calling it hopeless. She squeezed my hand. "Stay for the next part." I closed my fingers around hers. I was planning to.